Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I'm John DiFiore, the curator of jazz at the Garage at Chatham for the 2022 season. And I'm here today with the Giroux Brothers, the leaders of one of the groups that are coming up for our jazz festival in August. How you guys doing?
Doing good, John. How you doing?
Good. All right. So on your left, you have Nate Giroux. On your right, you have Tyler Giroux. Yes, they are real brothers. You can't tell by the way. All right.
Tell by the laugh and the voice.
You can.
So I'm just going to jump right in. Obviously, you guys have played your whole lives together. You're brothers. You work together. You create music together, right? So let's just start with that. How do you feel being brothers helps to make the Giroux Brothers group unique?
Well, I think that part of what has made the process unique for us and just the group unique is that we have kind of just from growing up together and learning to play music kind of in the same household and growing up that way, we have a really good kind of intuition with each other and are able to like create without having to communicate verbally what we want to do. And that kind of adds a nice element to like our live performances. That I think, part of what has helped us develop that is just having been, like you said, having been brothers and growing up together and just spending a lot of time together playing and otherwise, has really kind of helped to create a sound that we both really understand with each other. I don't know. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, it's the brotherly ESP, which you sometimes get with people that you aren't blood brothers with, for sure. But there's an enhancement to it because we've had so much similar lived experience. Our grandfather is a jazz pianist. Our dad was our high school music teacher. Growing up in the same house, of course, we've listened to a lot of the same things. And, if Tyler hears some cool new music, he's like, yo, you got to check this out. So we have so many similar influences that, yeah, it's definitely for sure. There's an ESP that goes on in improvisation. What's also cool, we've started writing music together, and that's a newer venture for us. But we each have kind of a different writing voice, and when they come together with all of those shared influences, it creates a cool new sound for us. I think the things that we've written together don't sound like Tyler's tunes, and they don't sound like my tunes. They sound like something different. So
yeah, I agree with that.
That's cool. So can you just talk a little bit about the group, the instrumentation, and what you play, and how that is, your platform for creating music, right? Why that instrumentation? What is the instrumentation?
Sure.
Yeah, when we started Giroux Brothers, which was in 2016, Tyler had just graduated with a master's degree, right? Master's degree in jazz studies. I had previously gotten an undergraduate degree in jazz studies, and we come from a family of jazz musicians. So there's a lot of jazz influence in the music that we make. And that certainly had an influence on the instrumentation. Of course, bass is the heartbeat of any jazz group. And bass and drums. You gotta have bass and drums. That's always my feeling. I think Tyler feels the same way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And for a while, we played as a cordless quartet. So Tyler plays valve trombone usually. I play saxophone, sometimes clarinet, bass and drums. And we did a lot of kind of old school jazz style playing. Think like, Chet Baker and Jerry Mulligan, or Stan Getz and Bob Brookmeyer. Pulling a lot of influences from those horn duos where there's a lot of interplay, a lot of that interaction that we're talking about we have easily as horn players. And then a few years into having the band, really decided, okay, we want to explore some things with a chordal instrument. So we've had both guitar and piano in the band. We're going to have a great pianist, Rob Lindquist, with us when we play at the festival. It adds a totally different palette to the music to have a chordal instrument, and we've been able to push ourselves into different genres, maybe still within the jazz idiom, but in different directions within the jazz idiom because of having that extra instrument that can fill out the sound.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would add to that too, like a lot of what influences like the musicians, at least I feel that we've decided to play with over the years, has been also looking for other unique voices, like the guys that we're going to have playing with us in August, Matt Nabalski, who I know that you know him very well, John, and Dylan Perillo, are both really good friends of ours that we have been in the band since the beginning. And I feel, in addition to being great players, have something to add artistically. And we're going to have, like Nate said, we're going to have Rob Lindquist joining us, and he's also an incredible musician. And I feel that has also been a pleasure and an influence on some of the writing decisions maybe that I've made and that you've made. And,
oh, yeah.
And just trying to create a sound out of, the voices that we have.
One of the cool things about all the members in our band is everyone's a band leader, even though not everyone's a band leader in Giroux Brothers. But that means everyone's used to bringing their own vision and a unique voice and going for something original in their own music. And so that helps because they can see our vision and where we want to go with it, and they're not afraid to try something new.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about the music. You've been speaking about the people that are playing the music with you at the concert in August, and I know that these are also some of the people that recorded the music with you in your album that you have out. So let's talk a little bit about that album. Maybe it may be beneficial if we could talk about a tune, right? Maybe one that each of you wrote, because I know you both have contributed to it. And just talk a little bit about, what you were thinking of when writing that tune. And because I know that people will be listening to your music, right? I'm sure you'll be new to some people's ears and they're going to want to check your music out before coming to the concert. So maybe if you each want to pick a tune that you wrote for the record and just talk a little bit about that tune.
Yeah, sure. I can talk about, there's a tune on the record that I wrote that's called Pleasantville. And I wrote it for my hometown that I grew up in. I remember exactly when the tune popped into my head. I was sitting in my ex-girlfriend's car at the bank, and there was this combination of comfort and monotony all woven into one that kind of made me feel like almost this eerie, pleasant but eerie sounds in my ear, almost like you might hear in a horror film at a where do you see a carousel at? What am I thinking of?
Like a theme park?
At a theme park, yeah,
like
I guess at a state fair, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe like you're at the state fair, but it's autumn and it's like dusk and it's just a little bit. It's pleasant, but it's creepy a little bit, and that's kind of what that tune sounds like to me, I guess. And so it's called Pleasantville, not named after the movie, and it draws a lot of influence from folk music, which I think is a theme, at least in my writing. I love jazz, but I've also found a lot of folk bands that I've really grown accustomed to listening to their sound, both in American folk bands and also bands across the pond. I'll shout out one actually. There's this great band from the UK called LAU, L-A-U, and they is accordion and violin and guitar. And the things that they do in that band, they just blow my mind. It's avant-garde, not in terms of dissonant, but avant-garde in terms of pushing the envelope into new types of music. And that's what really interests me. It's like, well, what if we did it this way? Never heard it that way. Let's try it. So those kinds of things, I guess, are what you would hear in my music, and it certainly comes across in Pleasantville. Sounds kind of like an old country waltz or a folk tune, but definitely in a jazz setting.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Interestingly enough, the tune that I wrote on that album that sticks out to me the most is also it's another waltz, which we kind of have a tendency to both write a lot of. But I wrote this song called "Tune for Mr. Ferris," and it actually had started as an assignment when I was a graduate student, and the assignment was to write a piece of music for a specific architectural space. Which I thought was an interesting concept. And I decided on Ferris wheels because I've always liked Ferris wheels. It's the thing you go to at a theme park where, you're at
I guess we should do an album about theme parks.
Well, yeah, probably. But you get to the top and you can see the whole park, and it's just like a really euphoric kind of a feeling. And while the tune itself is a little bit it's a waltz and it's not a fast waltz. It's just got kind of like a relaxing vibe. And, I can't remember all the details when I was writing it, but I just remember finding it like it got me into a different headspace, thinking about like a specific place where it would be performed or where you'd hear something like that. I don't know. And to Nate's point, like I would say there's probably a little bit of folk influence in it and also a little bit of blues influence to it as well. But yeah, that's the one that sticks out the most to me as far as what I wrote on that particular album.
Great. And of course you can, search the Giroux Brothers. That's Giroux, online. Find their music. You can also go on to thegarageatchatham.com and find out more information about the album that they're speaking of and other music of theirs.
We're on all major music services, and also you can find, I'm pretty sure the album's still on YouTube.
It is.
If it's
YouTube.
not, there are videos of the band on YouTube. So,
Great. So, part of the programming we have this summer is, of course you will be bringing your band up and playing your original music that you were just speaking of, but you'll also be playing some music by Dave Soldier, one of our artists in residence for this summer. So can we just let's talk about that for a second, and, what are you guys looking forward to with collaborating with Dave and his music this summer? I mean, have you played other people's music? I mean, I know in the jazz idiom we play other people's music, right? It's jazz standards written by other people, but this is a scenario where this is a modern composer and he has music specifically, that he's programming for your group. So, what about that project are you looking forward to?
well, we've never had someone write music specifically for our group. So first of all, that's an honor. Really excited to work with Dave just for that reason alone. In addition to that, though, if you check out any of Dave's music online, he's done a lot of different kinds of music and some really, really awesome stuff that I've added to my personal library as soon as I met the guy. I mean, just really great to listen to. One in particular, he did this project with Robert Dick, who is an avant-garde flute player. Really awesome musician, he has a head joint for his flute that he designed himself that actually slides so that he can, similar to how a trombone does a slide, he can do a slide on the flute, and has all these innovative techniques for playing the flute. I remember actually playing on a festival that was hosted at William Patterson while I attended there, called the ISM Improv Conference. And Robert Dick was one of the featured performers, and it just totally blew my mind. So when I saw that he had collaborated with Robert Dick and some other cats that I really enjoy listening to, I was just like, wow, we get to work with this guy. Cool. That's awesome. So we're really looking forward to playing Dave's music.
Yeah. Yeah, I would echo the same thing. I when I learned that we were going to be doing that, I went onto YouTube and checked out a lot of his music. One in particular that I really liked was Jazz Standards on Mars, I think it's called.
I think that's what it's called.
Yeah, and it's just, it's a little bit of, it's like obviously got some jazz influence, but it's got a very interesting take on it. And, again, like a wide variety of projects and collaborations. So, definitely excited to work with him and see what he comes up with for us.
Awesome. Yeah, I know that Dave's work is pretty vast and varying in style. So I too am like really excited to see what you all play of his and how you make, the music in his setting, which is, like I just said, varied. The instrumentation varies, right? The style you can hear that it was influenced by varies. So how he fits that into your, instrumentation and, more jazz influenced group, I'm excited to see what happens. Earlier in the conversation, you both started to kind of allude a little bit to musicians and styles that influence your writing and influence the overall roots of your group. So, I mean, you had mentioned Jerry Mulligan, and I mean, we are friends and we've spoken about music a lot over the years, and I know that you talked about Jerry Mulligan plenty of times and, his Live at the Vanguard record, and like swoon over those arrangements and the beauty of the players and everything. So, who would you say, for those listening that want to try and, connect your music to maybe some other places, who would you say are some of your biggest influences when it comes to your composing and also your style of playing?
You can go first?
Sure.
That's a big question.
Let's just say that. Big question. Well, I would say for me that there are a number of artists that have had a huge influence on me as a player and also as a musician or as a composer. The first that comes to mind as a valve trombonist is, of course, Bob Brookmeyer. He is one of my earliest favorite jazz artists, if you will. And I do really like his composing a lot, too. He was quite a prolific composer himself. Did a lot of big band arranging over the course of his life. He also wrote a lot of really interesting small group music. There's a couple of albums of his in particular. One of them, I think, is called Stay Out of the Sun, I think is the one I'm thinking of, that he has some really interesting compositions on. I'm also a piano player, and one of my biggest influences there would have to be Brad Meldau. His playing especially, but also his composing, I always have found to be very melodic and very creative, and he always has lots of different projects and different, one of the things that attracts me to a composer or an artist is the different styles that they have, the different types of projects that they do, and what you can kind of grab and hear their voice in different settings. And I feel like Brad has done a lot of that as well. I would say probably the other big one for me over the years compositionally that I've been inspired by a lot has been Ben Allison. He's a bass player. And he's done a lot of, again, different types of projects. His music has got some rock influence and folk influence, which I also can relate to. And again, just the musicality, the musicians that he chooses to bring together for his projects, I think really creates a sound that I've always really dug, even with the different variables of the different projects. I would say those are probably the biggest ones for me.
Brothers are allowed to steal answers. Just remember that. Because he took one of mine. Well, you know what? I'm sure that some listeners would be interested to know, certainly, who are the dead guys that inspired you?
I didn't even think of the dead guys.
My Fab Four, as far as dead saxophone players, and actually one of them's not dead, but would be Lester Young, Stan Getz, Sonny Rollins, and Joe Henderson. And so all of those players have certainly had a humongous influence on me as a player, as an improviser, as a composer. But, there's so much more to explore as a composer than just old school jazz or hard bop or even what's going on the jazz scene today. So I also would say I take a lot of influences from other kinds of music. Actually, a band that your wife showed me, John Grizzly Bear, and they opened for a band for a while called Radiohead, which I'm sure many people have heard of. That's a humongous influence. Mm-hmm. I mentioned Lau, the folk band from UK. I'm also a really big fan of the Punch Brothers, which is a folk band here in the States. Or I guess it's kind of selling all these bands short to genreify them, but for what it's worth. As far as cats on the jazz scene, though, I would say for some reason there's a magnetism for me towards the writing of modern bass players. Tyler mentioned Ben Allison. I really love Ben's writing. Really like the music of Chris Lightcap.
Oh, yeah.
One of my favorite all-time albums is by this bass player named Neil Kane. He's actually the bass player for Harry Connick Jr.'s big band, but he did his own project that was a chordless ensemble with 2 tenor saxophone players, bass and drums. That's called Backstabber's Ball, which has had a humongous influence on both my writing and my playing. And I would give a big shout out to the Brooklyn jazz scene right now. I think that's where the most innovative stuff is happening on the jazz scene, at least in my humble opinion. So there's, cats like Chris Speed, Andrew D'Angelo, Tony Malaby. One of my favorite bands is called Endangered Blood. Definitely worth checking out. And, to describe the music that I hear coming out of these groups, similar kind of influences with the folk music and kind of like an Americana sound mixed with almost like a grunge avant-garde jazz sound, which is just so interesting to me. So all that stuff, definitely a big influence on my writing.
Nice. Yeah, and I mean, knowing those groups, right, and knowing your guys' music, you can definitely hear those connections, that you mentioned, which is awesome. So when you perform your music live with your group compared to how people may know it from listening to your recordings. Is there a different approach that you take live on the bandstand with your group opposed to how you may approach the music while you're in the confines of the recording studio?
Well, I would say this. Mostly no, but in the recording studio, you're watching the clock, right? I mean, a little bit. Nobody wants a 14-minute jazz song on their records. I mean, some people do, but
yeah.
So, things are a little bit more methodically planned in a record situation. Okay, Tyler's going to take 2 choruses of solo or 2 times through the tune of improvising on this tune, and then Dylan's going to do this, and then we're playing it out and whatever. As opposed to live, we definitely still think about those things in advance, but if you're feeling it, play it. So the rules kind of go out the window a little bit, because part of what makes jazz and improvised music so special is the spontaneity of it. So we don't like to build too many walls.
Right. And kind of on that note too, well, obviously, if we play a song that's on the album, like it's going to be the same song, but we don't feel like we need to make it always sound exactly the same. In fact, like, a lot of the way, at least the tunes that we write, because improvisation becomes such a integral part to it, I would say it probably won't sound exactly the same as the album would.
Oh yeah. In fact, there are tunes on the album that there's a waltz on the album that we now play as like a funky backbeat 4 tune. So, there are some tunes of mine that I originally wrote as old school jazz tunes that again have brought into a more modern style. So, we like to mix it up, and just because we played it one way one time doesn't mean we're beholden to that the next time.
And we've also got some new stuff we've been working on, that's undoubtedly going to be put into the repertoire for the concert as well.
Oh, for sure.
So
yeah, we haven't been sitting on our thumbs during COVID, so
Right. Good. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the beauty of jazz, that fluidity of a tune. You can take a jazz tune and interpret it so many different ways and still stay true to the nature of what that tune is. Or at least the greats do that, right? That's the goal. But, so could you talk a little bit about the new music that you're writing? Is it some music that you wrote together in the same room? Is it music that you write together piece by piece? I know that obviously we're coming out on the back end, hopefully, of a pandemic, and I know that obviously changed a lot of people's scenarios. Is this music you wrote while in lockdown?
Both. So we haven't actually, have we actually sat down in person written music together? I don't think so. Over the pandemic, it was a lot of virtual.
Yeah.
Also, there was some distance between us for a large part of the pandemic. So, that's where having, Zoom or Google Meet or whatever video service you're using was a godsend for us. And I think for a lot of musicians to still be able to collaborate, when you're shut in at home. So the music that we've done together has mostly been virtual. Certainly, there's stuff that we've been doing separately, though, too. John, you know this about me because we've taught classes together on this. I'm obsessed with polyrhythms, so I've been experimenting with, okay, what can I do with 5 and 3 and 5 and 4, or 7 and 3, 7 and 4, and finding ways to make it musical rather than sound like we are robots playing in an odd time. So that's kind of been what in the direction I've been going. Maybe you can talk about your music, but also maybe you want to say something about, I think the coolest tune that we've written together is called The Perceptionist. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure, yeah. The Perceptionist, this is going back to probably the earlier days in the pandemic. I think, if I remember correctly, Nate sent me just a chord progression of some sort. He said, I don't know what to do with this. What do you think I should do? And I started to write a melody to it. And I wrote a melody and I sent it back to him. And he took the melody and kind of rearranged it and changed a few things. We passed it back and forth a few times, I guess is what I'm getting at. And it turned out into this thing, which I would agree. One of the things he said, was when we write tunes together, it doesn't really sound like either one of our tunes. It's kind of like a new thing. And I would say that this was one of the first things we did together that I think really kind of encapsulated that idea. It's, got like almost like a funky kind of a sound to it, and just the way that it melodically works, and it's really kind of like a trip the way that it came together.
And a trip to play, I will say.
Yes.
It goes through all sorts of different keys, and like
not the fun ones.
Yeah, you're right, not the fun ones either. He's right though. It has like a chilled out backbeat kind of sound, so you wouldn't know that we're up there sweating because we're playing through all the worst keys.
Yeah.
But that's where it sounds good. So
yeah, it came out great. As far as the other music that I've been writing, I actually have been working on a project with Dylan and Matt, the bass and drummer that are going to be with us. We have a collective piano trio, and we put out an album in was it back in November? So I had been writing some music, more specifically for piano trio that we've since played a couple times, at least in the quartet setting. I don't think we've played at quintet setting too much yet. But that has kind of taken on like a new, well, we did last summer. We played a couple of them, and, it really is interesting to hear, the melodies played, now with horns on them, and it really kind of changes the music, which is, like we were just talking about, is one of the things that makes it fun. It keeps it fresh, keeps it, innovative, I guess.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing. I hope that you're going to program that tune you were talking about. The Percussionist, I believe you said.
The Perceptionist. Yes,
Perception.
we definitely will play that too.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing it. It's always great to know a little bit of the backstory behind a tune and kind of, where people are coming from. I think that helps connect, people that may not, be traditionally educated in, how to understand music, connect to it, which is great.
Well, then let me just tell you, The Perceptionist, the title, that's not a word. Perceptionist. It's, the idea that there's someone out there who, as their job, they specialize in perception. So, we all know people in our lives that think that they can perceive everything about other people and make lots of assumptions. So, take it for what you will, but that's, hence the title, The Perceptionist.
Yep.
Right now, I'm even more excited to hear the tune.
Yeah.
It's going to be great.
Perceptionist.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for taking some time to speak with us and our listeners and our audience for the Garage at Chatham Summer Jazz Concert. Again, you have saxophonist Nate Giroux, trombonist Tyler Giroux, the two leaders of the Giroux Brothers. They'll be up in the Garage at Chatham this coming August. Make sure you go to thegarageatchatham.com to check out all the information about our Summer Jazz Series as well as our concerts prior to those earlier on in the summer. Again, my name is John DiFiore. I'm the curator of jazz for the Garage at Chatham, and I hope to see you up there this summer. Take care.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome, guys.